All right, page 115, Guardian of the Deep. 240 feet long and 66 feet high, carved out of living rock, the Sphinx is the largest and oldest statue from the old world, still intact. Over 2,000 years after the Sphinx was made, the Egyptians erected a 68-foot statue of Thebes, not to be confused with the Greek Thebes, which is now fallen and crumbled. Also, the Greeks at Olympia constructed a seated statue of Zeus, the Roman Jupiter, that stood at 68 feet in height, which likewise has not survived. 10. It is a testament to the ingenuity of pre-flood engineers that this relic, exposed to weather and catastrophic conditions for over 4 millennia, that it should remain largely intact, though statues built almost 1,000 years after the flood have long since perished. The Sphinx identifies a very old concept recorded in the book of Genesis. After mankind rebelled against the ordinances of God and ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, their eyes were opened and they then knew that they were naked, no longer fit to reside in paradise, the walled garden. They were banished from Eden. Because the tree of life, by virtue of its fruit, could sustain them forever, they were sent out of the garden, and at the entrance was placed a guardian cherub with a flaming sword at the east of Eden to prevent them from obtaining access back to the tree of life. The cherub's duty was to protect the interests of God from defilement, for mankind had become unclean, was naked, and now because of the knowledge of sin and rebellion, man had to be clothed in a new garment before entering back into the paradise of God. The Sphinx, even today, faces the east towards the rising sun, which is typified in many archaic beliefs as the fiery, flaming sword of antiquity before the image of these two most sacred trees, two large pyramids. The Hebrew cherubim finds their origin in the Akkadian caribou sphinxes that acted as guardians of temple entrances. 11. They were exclusively placed at the eastern entrances of palaces and temple precincts. 12. Interestingly, some Babylonian temples guarded by cherubim were called the Temple of the Great Tree. 13. In the Near East, these cherubim conveyed a twofold meaning, inferring that their presence protected inaccessible areas forbidden to sinful men, while also signifying that by passing by them and entering the temple courts that they guarded, the truths of the priesthood and its mysteries were indeed accessible. A further embellishment linking the Genesis narratives to that many temples in Old Babylonia had priestesses in the entrances that enticed passerby to enter by holding out fresh apples in exchange for temple truths, a ritual in commemoration of the mother of all living, Eve, and her taking of the fruit of the tree of knowledge, a very old concept known by the Babylonians and their predecessors. Some of these priestesses were charged with having sexual relations with temple visitors in a darkly twisted theology that brought more offering to the priesthood, for when men accepted the gift of the apple from the female, he was admitted into the inner sanctuary of the premises and rewarded by carnally knowing the priestess, a practice of sacral prostitution directly linked to the belief in the Genesis narratives. This knowledge of carnal relations with the girl came with a price that was paid to the temple. The sacral prostitution is practiced early on and was a main component to the goddess religions and served to teach men that knowledge was gained through females, priestesses who in turn received divine knowledge from the gods themselves, much in the same fashion as Eve received information from the deceitful serpent. As a divine protector, the cherub sphinxes became a very popular household item. Some artisans and merchants made their living by carving and trading miniature replicas of them. In biblical writings, they are referred to as teraphim, guardian divinities of the gate, named after Terah, the father of Abraham. In Hebraic writings, like the Book of Jasher, we learn that Terah was a religious worshiper of these idols, and although he was a general at the armies of Babylonia and was a Chaldean, he was rebuked by his son Abram, who smashed all his idols. The original tradition associated with the Sphinx was that it was a watcher. These angelic beings were of an order of heavenly guardians entrusted with protecting the interests of God on earth, but some of them fell and induced mankind to worship them through their forbidden knowledge as opposed to the Creator. Arabic beliefs seem to be linked to these traditions, for the name by which they call the Sphinx was Abu El-Hol, meaning father of terror. 14. This epithet alludes to the duty of cherubim to terrify men from entering the holy places consecrated to God. The Arabic titles derives from the Egyptian word for guardian, Hu. 15. The word Sphinx is not at all an Egyptian word, but was the Grecian title given to the monument that was in itself based off of a false etymology in reference to an old story about the statue strangling a man for not being able to answer a riddle. These people thought the statue bestowed secrets of great importance to travelers in the forms of riddles, which are images of truth artistically concealed within puns, allegories, and metaphors. Hold on. My luck, I'm going to hit a button. Thus, the Greeks of later times believed the meaning of the Sphinx was throttler, when, in fact, the word actually means to bind closely together. 16. This meaning identifies the Sphinx as a watcher, for in occult writings based off of ancient traditions, the watcher guardian was to protect portals that link worlds together. 17. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead are torturous guardians of portals in the world of the dead that attempt to keep disembodied spirits from passing through into the other world. 18. Such protectors were used in Egypt's temple complexes also and were called Eker lions, which were sphinxes placed before doors and gates. The Aker statues were keepers who open and shut the gates into the worlds of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. 19. Remarkably, the ancient title of the Sphinx given by Egyptians was Aker because it was believed by them that the gigantic statue stood atop the underworld, which was also called Aker. Gerald Massey, in his Ancient Egypt Light of the World, wrote that the Sphinx protected the secret of Earth's beginnings from the abyss, the deep, and that it was carved out of the rock at the center of the earth to commemorate the sacred place of the creation. 20. Perhaps this is further alluded to in the Book of the Dead, which reads, Hail, Lord of the shrine which standeth at the middle of the earth. He is I, and I am he. Such a shrine would refer to the Great Pyramid, which the Sphinx guards. Massey also wrote that the Egyptian text called the Ritual teaches that the mystery of the Sphinx originated with the mouth of earth. Originated with the Mount of Earth pyramid as the place of passage, of burial, and of rebirth. 21. That it was known that God had set a watcher to guard this place of passage connecting the abyss to earth and earth to the heavens seems to be implicated in the book of Job, where the patriarch asked, Am I a sea yam or a sea monster that thou settest a watch over me? The word chosen by Job to describe the sea, yam, literally refers to the heaven assaulting sea, the tumultuous primitive abyss. 22. The assigning of the pyramid directly behind the Sphinx in Kefren by Egyptologists is directly related to excavations conducted around the statue. Over 3,500 years ago, the first recorded excavations were carried out. Thutmose IV discovered an early restoration stela near the Sphinx that claimed that in very remote times the statue was in very bad need of repair. Thutmose was also called Thutmose, and in the stele of Thutmose IV we learn that this gigantic statue belongs to Khepra, the very mighty, the greatest of spirits, and the most august. Khepra was regarded as the sole power that was worshipped as eternal. 23. This account serves to show that the Sphinx was found by the earliest Egyptians. It was incredibly mysterious, even provoking early pharaohs to worship it as a god. These old rulers were baffled as to its age. 24. Its existence points to an elder tradition among the Egyptians of a supreme being, for being is the meaning of the word in Egyptian. 25, from a root, kefir, that means transformer. Hold on. Egyptologists adhere to the assumption that the pyramid behind the Sphinx belonged to Khephren only because the restoration stela bore the syllable Kaf, a meaningless piece of the text that they claim signifies the name of Khephren, despite the absence of the necessary cartouche that is supposed to surround a royal or deified name. 27. A single syllable, not even qualifying as a hypothetical piece of evidence, has evolved beyond theoretical status to become passed off in all the history books as fact, and this despite that the earliest people calling themselves Egyptians, people of Kemet, recorded that the Sphinx and pyramids were more ancient than Khephren. Even the later Greeks knew the Sphinx was not of Egyptian origin, believing that this silent but colossal statue was solely responsible for killing the ancients. 28, referring to the Great Deluge. The Stele of Thomas declares that the Sphinx was built to commemorate the sacred place of creation, or literally, of the first time. This holy site is said to go back to the time of the Masters of Ker, or Kar, which as a divine locality identifies the Neter Kar of the underworld abyss, a place of exit from Amenta. This Amenta is the hidden underworld, the grave of man's lost world, as Eden is. 29. It was also where the dead are raised again to inherit a second life. In Amenta, it is the duty of the gods to assign thrones to the spirits and to banish the damned to a place set apart from them and to destroy their bodies. 30. In Amenta is located the great deep. 31. Taking all of this into consideration, we see why the earliest Greeks called this statue a sphinx, for it was the duty of this guardian to bind closely together the world of the spirit with that of men. Archaeological evidence affirms the extreme antiquity of the Sphinx and the monuments of Giza about it. Seemingly dateless temples near the Sphinx and pyramids are enormous and exhibit signs that long ago, when they were still old, they were restored with great slabs of stone added to their edifices to prevent further erosion, but these were again taken by later generations for building materials. Though the Egyptians may have renovated these colossal structures, they did not build them. In 1912, another huge temple was excavated, and the stones of its construction were bare of all decoration, one measuring 25 foot long. This temple was carved out of solid rock. 33. An inscription discovered long ago by the Egyptians tells us that the temple was discovered by them in a time when the Sphinx was in bad need of repair, as was already mentioned. 34. Colin Wilson, in his From Atlantis to the Sphinx, wrote that these temples have no architectural identifiers linking them to Egyptian masonry methods or designs. Unlike the elaborately carved cylindrical columns seen all throughout Egypt's oldest surviving buildings, the columns found at Giza from beneath the sands are devoid of all writings and are rectangular. This is definitely not characteristic of Egyptian artisanship. Further, these temples around the pyramids and Sphinx are constructed of stones weighing 200 tons each. 35. Frederick Haberman, in Tracing Our Ancestors on page 63, wrote that the Sphinx is the most important symbol of Eden on earth that we have left, constituting a link between paradise lost and paradise regained. The Sphinx, with a body of a lion and the head of a woman, symbolizes nothing less than the prophecy that from the seed of the woman shall come the Lion of the tribe of Judah to crush the head of the serpent. Haberman wrote that for millennia, 49 centuries, it has faced east, watching for his return. Giza's mysteries are yielding to the light of discovery, but the Sphinx alone cannot unlock its secrets. The paradox lies in that though the Egyptians did not build these monuments, it is with ancient Egypt's oldest inscriptions that we find the keys to understanding the holy mysteries of God and the message and purpose of the Great Pyramid. Sometime in Egypt's obscure past, they were visited by one who knew these secrets, and he passed to them the meanings of these mysteries. And though later generations had lost the interpretations to these teachings, they had faithfully preserved them for future people to study and comprehend. Just as Giza is intimately associated with the realms of the dead, so now we will learn from the esoteric and truly arcane teachings of the Egyptian Book of the Dead.